Hi, for Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the propaganda, the divide us by gender propaganda that's doing the rounds on most of the prominent business websites, which is the gender wage gap. Now, as usual, it's coordinated and it's choreographed, and as soon as the story appears on the website, then there's this absolute cacophony of supporting stories from supposed experts that say that's right, the gender wage gap. Women are oppressed by evil fascist Nazi men. I'm always surprised at the amount of Jewish women that appear on these. Just instantly, it's like you push a button and then 100 stories by supposed journalists, commentators, experts, industry watchers, and so on appear. I'm wondering, whether we're being baited by this, because there's such a heavy overrepresentation of Jewish women. The Goldbergs, the Steins, the Cohens, the whole thing, and there's just so many of them in the commentary here in support of the gender wage gap. Now, everybody knows there is no gender wage gap. So, firstly, why is it being pushed so hard and so aggressively? And if it did exist, why do so many lies get told in order to push the propaganda? If it was as was claimed, you wouldn't need to tell a single lie. The facts would support it. So I'm wondering whether these supposed Jewish commentators are really just invented, whether they actually don't exist, or their name is Smith or Jones or something like that. They're just inventing Jewish nom de plumes, pen names, just so when people point out that why do 70% of the commentaries come from Jewish, many of whom appear to be lesbians, then they say, that's it. Not only is the gender wage gap an issue, but anti-Semitism and misogyny, and so I wonder whether that's contrived. Now, if it's not contrived, then why do so many Jewish women want to comment on something that they know is not to be true? Anyway, look, coming to the nub of it, we all know that there's no gender wage gap. Now, there can be an occupational preference gap. There can be somebody willing to work the long hours or make the career choices. Now, there are some sort of things that come in and say, well, women who choose to have children, a large number of children, today will be a large number of children, 3, 4, and so on, and choose to parent them at home, that their wage potential over their lifetime, or actual wages over their lifetime, would decline because they make that choice. But they turn that around and say, well, actually, she didn't make that choice to have children and be a stay-at-home mum. Now, to do that, to be able to have that many children stay at home, you need a husband on a very high income, like as in the top 2% of income earners. So, which actually isn't that high an income if you're at the bottom end of the 2%. But nonetheless, in that upper 1 or 2% of incomes, if you're going to have that many children and be a stay-at-home mother, assuming that you're not living on government handouts or something, then so straight away she's married into a situation where there's a considerable amount of wealth going around, which gives her that discretion, that option. Most women do not have that option. At best, they can have one child, but unless they've got an above average income earning, substantially above income earning partner, then there's just no way they can even contemplate that, let alone do it. So most people, the two incomes are needed in most households, which means it's very difficult to have children. But the impression that's given is that she's not actually making a choice to have children. She's being forced into it by the patriarchy, by misogynist Nazis that are everywhere, forcing her to do it, forcing her to procreate against her will. Oppression. So a very Marxist sort of concept, very similar to the sort of propaganda that the Soviet communists used to try and move women out of the rural farm neighborhoods and into working in factories in the later 1920s and into the 1930s in the Soviet Union. The propaganda really isn't that different. So, but coming to this idea of there is a gender page gap because women are uniquely oppressed by misogynist, evil, fascist, Nazi men. That's the thrust of it, which is, of course, a great way to gin up and fan the flames of supposed gender conflict. The women are oppressed victims by evil men. If only we had a socialist Marxist society, then that oppression couldn't take place. And it's it's how capitalism works and the oppression and so on. So a lot of very sort of undergraduate, hysterical, juvenile positions are put forward to say, well, this explains what it is happening, the gender wage gap. This is why. And if only all men would change their behaviour, and only all men, then we could solve this problem. That it is a woman's choice to work certain professions. Well, even where say in nursing, for example, where there's a majority of women in nursing, they look at the claim about that nursing has relatively low wages. The allegation there is that women go into that profession, nursing, and that then men organise the wages to be reduced in nursing for the sole purpose of oppressing women, and these sorts of things. These absurd and fantastic claims, and it's hard to follow them. Something like the reasoning is that of a young child, and often quite contradictory. But I'll talk about my own, my own experiences. I'll start with one here. I'm the EVP at this particular company, and the position of sort of marketing director or kind of junior VP, if you like, of marketing comes up, and we're about to advertise it and that sort of thing, and look at the applicants. And one of the women already works there in the company, who's a friend of the CEO's sister, so it has to be handled as some political delicacy. So she comes, she knocks on the door, my office door, and comes in again, can I talk to you? And she's got a look on her face that she's going to ask something, and there's a lot of import in it. So sure, come in. What would you like to talk about? I assume it's to do with her own job portfolio, but she wants to do this marketing VP thing. So I'm thinking, well, you're not really qualified for it. But anyway, okay, I don't mind. The mere fact that she's prepared to come in and make a case is, to me, she's got to be given a hearing, and that's to be commended. So that anyone that does that has got a certain amount of get up and go, a certain amount of motivation, and that should be rewarded by giving them a full hearing. That's my perspective, at least. So she comes in, and I'm asking about, well, what qualifications, what do you think you can bring to the table? And she really couldn't bring anything to the table. She said, well, I'm going to work hard at it. Well, I'm going to try really hard, and I'm going to do my best. Well, okay, great. But what do you, have you done a job, for example, let's go through, have you done a job similar to this before? What results did you get? What unique insights can you bring? Why will you be better than sort of someone else? And what's on what basis would I consider you as a candidate, or a prime candidate, or the candidate, if you will, for the job? And she sort of looks around, well, I don't know. She had no coherent answer. She just was blindly sort of shooting in the dark and hoping for the best. So I said, all right, well, look, she kind of reported to me indirectly through, in the company. And I said, look, you arrive at sort of 1 minute to 9. You are walking out the door at 1 minute to 5. I think I've only seen you after 5 o'clock, maybe once, that I can recall. Correct me if I'm wrong. You take long and generous lunch hours. You do work, but the work you do, you tend to go around in circles rather than actually do productive work. So you're self-organized. I didn't phrase it quite this brutally, but You appear to be not very productive from what I can see. When I give you fairly simple tasks to do, it seems to take you forever to get them done. You're always citing some other priority that's allegedly come up that always takes precedence over what you're to be measured and be accountable for, which is always a tactic that people that want to avoid accountability always do. They always say that, oh, this other priority, I had to deal with that, but you can't measure that other thing. You can only measure what you've given them to do. So I pointed out, wherever she was given discretion, she effectively became much less productive, and so on. So she had a habit of huddling and getting all huddling in groups with the girlies and sort of going through their little whispering in the corner type thing. And I think that's kind of not a good look if you're in an executive role, which she was, a more junior role at the time. She only had the job because of her connection into the CEO's family and through the CEO's sister and that sort of stuff. Otherwise, I doubt she'd have had the job there. So looking at all the thing, she simply wasn't qualified. Now her next aim was, well, look at the people around here. I'm no worse qualified. A lot of them, they are. Now that I would concede, but again, that was largely because of the CEO's tendency to give patronage roles out to the friends and relatives of his friends and that sort of stuff. That was his, given that was his thing, which I was trying to counter at the time. So her argument is, well, they're all fucking useless. So what's wrong with me being useless? No, it's not how it works. But she couldn't really come forward with anything. Now, as we talked it through, because I had to make sure I was in a good, I had a solid reason to say no or yes, in the event she was qualified. I figured I'd be getting questions about it later. So I was happy to go through it with her. Really, her whole basis was, look, I want to have a prestigious job. I want to be able to go to the socialite party scene. And I want to say that I'm the VP of marketing. I've got a prestigious job and I've got a well-paid job and I can buy better brand name clothes. I'm going to get a park, one of the executive parking. So there's a line of parking spots right next to the sort of the main doorway there, and they were the executive parking spots. So she wanted one of those because that was prestigious, and the list went on. Now, her sole thing was prestige and to a lesser extent money, but particularly prestige. But other than that, she had no. I want the prestige, therefore that job should be mine. She had a considerable sort of entitlement thing, and so I tried to explain. She said, "Look, let's suppose you get the job. Let's suppose you're given the job right now. I would make you accountable for performance." And straight away, you can see the look in the face. Accountability. You're going to measure what I do. Oh no. So, and again, her comeback was, well, some of these other people, they're not getting measured. Why should I get measured? Well, no. If you get the job, you're going to be measured on your performance. Now, let's suppose you're required to the previous incumbent would be prepared to work back until midnight necessary to get the launch program for the new product out if they were falling behind. Would you do that? Oh, I couldn't do that because and this and that and the next thing. So, okay, well, what how you, if you take this job or if you get this job, those are the level of responsibilities that you're going to have. Those are things that you will, from time to time, not every day, you will need to do. You'll need to make that level of commitment to the success of the role. You're clearly not prepared to do that. So again, why should you get the job? And she sort of just couldn't get it. Well, why is accountability an issue? Why do I have to? Why are you asking me to do it? Why do you want to why do you want to measure my performance? Can't you just give it to me and then we'll have lots of nice little meetings and we'll talk nicely to each other and then that'll be in. And it was almost show how much you love me by giving me allowances and letting me off the hook for accountability. And that'll be a good relationship and that's what matters. And no, that's not what matters. And I just couldn't get her to accept this idea of accountability and getting the job done, commitment to getting the job done and so on. So she was she tried to sort of go around me and use her friendship with the CEO's sister to try and get a gig in there. But, and he did come to me and said, well, why don't you give her a shot? And I said, look, I don't mind. But this is the conversation I had with her. So this is the number. Why is there a difference in the overall pay rates of women? Now, the same goes for, say, workers where somebody works 4 days a week, and you say to them, look, we need to get this done. I need 3 people to work an extra day, and all the men will put their hand up, or nearly all the men, but you'll be lucky if any women put their hand up. And if any woman does put her hand, she wants to impose conditions on it. So, well, I'll work that extra day, but I have to start later and leave earlier, and I have to do this and have to do that and have to do so and so. And if my mother calls me during the day, then I need to leave, or if my kids call me, that type of thing. So it's very conditional. So well, that's no good to me. That means you may or may not turn up, or may not stay. So again, one of the men gets those extra hours. Now, I'm not saying this is the case in every single one, but it's rarely not so. So my experience is that men were far more dependable, far more reliable, far more willing to go that extra yard. Now, there are various other arguments to bring. So, well, the reason women won't work late is because they're going to get raped if they go out to the car park to the car, or they're going to get robbed and raped if they take public transport, or this, that, and the next thing. So, well, okay, in the case where someone's taking public transport, all right, but most businesses, including the business I worked in, if you're a woman, you don't get this if you're a man, by the way, but if you're a woman, you get a free taxi fare back to wherever you live. So again, this isn't something that isn't extended to men. This is only for women. So this idea of women are in terrible mortal danger and can't be accountable, but yet they're oppressed, but they can't do this. But if they do, if they're asked to work extra hours, they're being oppressed. But if they don't get offered the extra hours, then they're still being oppressed. And so the arguments are ludicrous. And again, the whole thing's a propaganda scam to foment gender conflict in Western society. But the reality is women make different career choices. They make different commitment choices, whether they have children or not. There are women who don't have any children, by the way, and aren't married, so they could easily do this. They could easily make the commitments. Now, I'll go back, this is a number of years now, where I got plonked into the human resource department of this big multinational. And it was just one of those things where they move you around. If you're like a management cadet trainee thing, which they called it at the time, they move you in different departments to get the different experience in different areas, which I think is a good thing, by the way. So they put me into human resources, and the job that I had to fill in for, as someone going on hold, the job I had to fill in for was to look after the trainees, the entry level or beginning level trainees that were coming in. At the time, there was a verbal and a written examination you had to pass, otherwise you couldn't go on to the next phase. All very strictly pass or fail back then. And in any way, there were, I don't know, there was 10, for example, there were 10 young men and 5 young women, so I say, and everyone got the same worksheets and the same assignments, so there was no difference there. But come the appointed day, all of the young men had handed in their work, but none of the young women had. So, well, why? Why have you? But then you get and these were young women. They had no children. One or two of them may be married, but no, they were basically people that could have put in the hours and had the time, but they just didn't do it. And I was rather surprised. Well, why not? Anyway, while this was going on, the one of the, I can't remember who it was now, one of the senior executives, someone had the power to fire me, so you had to take notice of those sort of people. The guy came and he said, look, I want you to, decision's been made, I want you to regardless of the whether the young women hand in their assignments or they do well at them or it's rubbish or whatever, you will pass them. You will give them a good pass, and you won't give them a bare pass, 51% or something. You'll give them a credit pass, which I think was say 75%. So you'll give them all a credit. This is the young women. You'll give them all a credit pass regardless. So I was sort of, well, I mean, this was a severe departure from a merit-based system, of course. And so I was, well, what if they don't even hand in their assignments? Don't care. Well, they hand them out, you will all give them all a credit pass. So that went on back at the time. And again, this is, I mean, decades ago, for goodness sakes. It was the beginning of the, interestingly, an American CEO had come in to run the business. And so I would guess that had come from, not that I realized at the time, I would suggest that had come from him, because he would have this gender equity crap coming out of the United States at the time. So anyway, this was these were the sort of things were going on to make sure that the women were being passed through. Now, interestingly, none of them handed their assignments in, but the young men already knew this. They were aware of this. Some of the women were bragging about it, or pretending that if they were required to hand the paper in, their assignment in, that this itself was a form of oppression that was uniquely directed against women by I mean, they weren't using the Nazi misogyny type stuff back then, but you know, why are you picking on me was the standard sort of female position. So I gave them another. So look, it was due on Friday, but if you can get it done by Monday or Tuesday, then fine. You know, I'll accept that. And I think one or two maybe handed in some half-assed piece of work. The others didn't. And so I wanted them to hand it in because I didn't want it to look like, I didn't want the young men to think that they were being discriminated against in as much as the women were being favoured by not having to meet the same standard. But they still hadn't at the end. And one of the women had complained to somebody, and this boss guy got to hear about it. So he came around to my little office, you know, red-faced, and I told you to. So I explained to him, look, I'm trying to get them to at least hand the paper in so it looks good, in as much as the young men, you know, won't feel put out. I don't give a fuck whether those young men are put out. You'll do what I told you to do. Otherwise, you'll be looking for another job. And going, oh, shit, all right. And I was young enough at the time where I would sort of meekly accept those sort of you know, threats and haranguings and so on. But this was so my experience with women is I can fully understand the overall earnings of men are greater than women, but it's not a gender wage. You have nothing to do with it. It's to do with choices of career and choices of, you know, do I work that extra day, choices of hours and overtime. Also, there was other things where, say, people are paid on the certifications they have. So they're certified as to do this and to do that and to do the next thing. You know, it could be, I don't know whether it's certified to drive a forklift or certified to be a health and safety officer or certified to give first aid. You know, there are a whole range of certificates. And for some companies give you a little bit of extra pay on top. This can be the case in nursing as well, where if you have a certification, you can get an extra $1,000 a year on your pay packet. But quite a few of the male nurses that you know, I'm aware of have many of these certifications, so that they can add $10,000 plus a year to their pay packet. But the women choose not to do these things, or not to do them in the same numbers as the men do. And this too has an effect on outcomes. So the reality is there is no gender pay. You know, for the same job, the same qualifications, the same work, everyone's paid the same. And it's been that way since the 1960s. So this idea that men and women for the same job are paid differently is a total and absolute lie. But it's the sort of propaganda that's still doing the rounds. And the topic isn't being discussed honestly at all. In fact, the amount of dishonesty in the topic of this gender wage gap, the dishonesty is the thing that's staggering, and it's still going on. And all these journalists and all these websites and all these propaganda buffets know that it's untrue, and yet again aggressively push it. You've been a Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.